STEM, only 19% of women. And finally, also in the startup world, we have only 10% of women that lead startup. So basically, we have a major issue. And unfortunately, although we have the feeling that we act a lot, we still have a lot of action, an action plan to set up to increase these figures, to change these figures. What we've done with the Digital Ladies and Allies is we have written a white paper. After the meeting, we'll give you all the link if you're interested in to participate and to also propose your own point of views on these issues. This white paper is called Mixity and Digital Efficiency. Many members have participated to this paper. We have a community with 25% of men. It's not only a women community. A lot of chief digital officers belong to this community. We have teachers, we have students, we have a lot of people coming from the civil society, leaders in diversity too. And we have built strong links with other organizations. This is why we are very happy to meet you tonight also. The basic lines that we want to emphasize for the coming years is based on education, training and visibility. Basically, on education, we want really to encourage women to go to take career. We are dealing with the digital culture, and we believe it in kindergarten. We deal with networks, and we believe that networks with companies, with teachers, and with other organizations is very successful. We want to increase internship for the girls and the boys in tech. We have set up some big events. For example, the Girls Tech Day last year in Paris, and you are all invited to the next one in Marseille, 30 November, because it's not only a Parisian issue. We work with head techs and dedicated organizations. So, for example, we have supported the RoboCup. On training, we believe that it's important to facilitate access to the digital training, no matter how old are you. And for that, we have many partnerships. We have one with Coding Days. So I started back to coding myself last year. We also work with Simplon. We had made a big workshop, Dégenrons les Tech, last September. And next January, we're going to set up new workshops with the École 42, Sophie Vigier. In terms of visibility, we believe that girls have to be really under the light, under the spotlight, in fact. Therefore, our do tank was present in Vegas for the CES. We were top 10 influencer for Vivatech. We will be present at the Web Summit in Lisboa next November. At the Women's Forum, we are part of the Diversity Day, the talent directory. And we support medias, so such as Chuchoteuse, that is also a startup. We help to fundraise its own project, and Business au Féminin. So we do really believe that acting within these three big lines, training, education, visibility, is a key point to reduce these inequalities. And we really believe in the strength of all these communities working all together. So have a great night, and thank you.
Okay, so some of you are new tonight, so we always have this slide for you to know who are the organizers of the meetup. So you have Natalie. Chloe is not here, she's at the conference. Marina, she's on the front, and myself, Caroline. We always remind you what WiMLDS is all about. So our goal is to support, is to also promote women and gender minorities in machine learning and data science. So no matter if you are studying, practicing, or aspiring to work in the field, you are more than welcome. Tonight, we are also live streamed. We are super happy about that because we chose to make our meetups in English in order to share knowledge not only with the French people, but also with everybody. And we have a code of conduct. So tonight, more than usual, please be kind. You are always super nice to each other. We know it, but it's just a kind reminder. We are here to share knowledge, so I would expect you to be like kind to speakers and also your co-attendees. We also would like to thank you because last week we reached more than 3,000 members. For us, it's something we still cannot believe. We started it 2 years ago, and the impact, the desire to join this community has been very strong from you, and it gives us the energy to keep going. So thank you on behalf of the team. Just a few numbers. We already organized 20 meetups. Actually, it's 21st with today, or 21 with today. 6 Hors-séries, 1 coding workshop. We love being on Twitter and share knowledge, and we welcomed more than 60 speakers. So those of you or people who say that it's a pipeline issue, they have no clue. Last week, Žofia, who's going to speak later, and our very own Marina got the chance to meet with the French Minister of Economy and Finance, and they even introduced him the notion of recommender systems, and we are super duper proud of them. So thank you, because it starts with representation. Marina also shared a blog post about the Rexis community. The conference happened 2 weeks ago in Copenhagen. If you want to have a clue about the best papers about the topic, please refer to it. We also shared data from a salary negotiation workshop we did in March. Go and share it. We also shared a data set from the Women Soccer World Cup. We did a Bayesian workshop, CMD standby, workshop for Bayesian workflow. I'm sorry. There is one scikit-learn workshop which will happen in December. It's a free one. If I remember, yes, it's the 18th of December, and it has been shared by Manon Ansart, who spoke in April, if you were there. So I strongly encourage you to have a look at it. We will share it on Twitter and on our Medium post later. This is a big conference in France. The France is AI conference is going to happen on the 23rd of October. If you would like to attend, have a look. The lineup is always very interesting. There is also a call for speakers that has been made from the Centre de Recherche Interdisciplinaire. They are going to host a workshop about AI and green topics. So if you were there 1 week ago, we were there. The CRI is really involved into the community. So if you would like to speak, let us know. We will put you in touch. There is also a challenge. It's I'm not going to be lying, it's from my company. They are doing a partnership with AWS, and it's a reinforcement learning challenge. There is a price there. So if you'd like to get familiar with AWS and play with self-driving models, have fun. We will also share the links. Very soon, in a few days, we are going to have our second round BBL WiMLDS Paris session. So we're going to read a paper which is entitled Gender Shades, Intersectional Accuracy Disparities in Commercial Gender Classification. Yes, it's an amazing paper. So if you're free at lunchtime, please join us. We are also happy to tell you that our next meetup will happen on the 28th of November, and the lineup is complete. We are going to welcome a data science lead from Caring. Her name is Imen El Karawi, and she's going to share tips and tricks to how to start from scratch a data science team. Then I need to have a look at it because it's a long title. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence, and it's going to be a talk given by Alice Otmani, who's an associate professor at UPEC. And we will have the chance to welcome Sonia Barry, who's an advisor to the president at UNESCO, and she's going to share like data and work that has been done about women in the tech field. And this woman is extremely inspiring. So if you're free, make sure to come that night. Tonight, we also have inspiring women and future role model. Emma, you already won, so good luck. No, I'm not ready. And then the topics, just for you to know, childhood dream to Pi world record. Then we're going to talk about computer vision and how to accelerate molecular stimulation with data. If you want to tweet, you know the deal. And before we start, I would like to say a few words to you, Emma. And I'm going to tell to all of you a story. In April, we were having dinner with one of the speakers, and Marina and I were asked questions. Who would you dream to meet? And we had two names, Kate Crawford and Emma Haruka. So tonight, it's a big night for us, and I'd like to thank you for being here. And so now I'm going to talk in Japanese. Emma-san, パリの WiMLDS チームは嬉しいです。あなたは子供の時、数学が好きでした。そして、あなたは世界記録を破りました。今日、私たちの夢は現実になりました。どうもありがとうございます。
ありがとうございます。Unfortunately, I don't speak French. Just to say hello, like bonjour, but that's it. My talk is about my Pi record, and I'm a developer advocate at Google, and my Twitter, LinkedIn, like everything but Instagram is at YU, because I was too old to have an Instagram account. Where should I stand? Is he okay? Okay. So back in March, we announced that we calculated 31 trillion digits of pi and broke the world record, and we got a nice PDF file from the Guinness World Records, not the physical paper, but we made the announcement. And before actually talking how we did it, I'd like to talk about the history of pi and computers. We've been calculating pi for thousands of years. I mean, we as humans. In 2000 BC, this is 4,000 years ago, ancient Babylonians seem to know that pi was close to 3.1. So it's the first digit after this decimal point. And in the 15th century, a mathematician in India, Madhava Sangamargama, knew pi was close, like up to 10 digits. So that's 9-digit improvement in 3,500 years. And in 1949, so when we got electronic computers, one of the earliest computers was used to calculate pi. The computer was ENIAC, and the number of digits was 2,000 digits. And since then, we use computers to calculate more and more digits. In 2009, they did the final record with supercomputer with 2.5 trillion digits. And in the same year, Ferris Bellard, I think he's from France. He's the author of FFmpeg and QM, so he's a software engineer, and he did a similar scale pi calculation on his desktop computer. And people realized, hey, I think our desktop computers, personal computers, are fast enough to handle these kind of computing instead of using supercomputers. And then a bunch of people jumped into the competition, and in 2016, Peter Traub and Alexander E. Calculated 22 trillion digits, and this year we did 31 trillion digits. Why is it hard to calculate pi? Because it involves a lot of data, because this is a data scientist meetup. I think I can talk about data. It's very, very memory intensive. In order to calculate 31 trillion digits, you need 170 terabytes of data. And if you had 100 terabytes, 170 terabytes of DRAM, like memory, you can store everything on memory, so there's no problem. But in most cases, we don't. So we need to use disk, and disks are slower. In the 1990s, we already had hard drives running at 40, 50 megabytes per second. But today, we have hard drives only running at 200 megabytes. So hard drives only got 5 times faster when processors got like tens of thousands of times faster. So handling that much data was the biggest challenge. And 170 terabytes is approximately worth 5 years of HD video, depending on the bitrate, or more than 300 years of audio. So it's a lot of data. And in the case of videos or audio, you probably don't want to worry about a single bit flip in the data. You still get like reasonable quality or almost the same result. But in this kind of calculation, if you had a single bit error anywhere, your entire result could be broken. So we needed to have very reliable hardware. I don't know why this guy was on the right-hand side, but was the biggest bottleneck. And why don't we use supercomputers just as we did in the past? Well, we can still use supercomputers. We could, but it's really hard. All the past milestones of 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion, these were hit by supercomputers. Like NRC, I think this was in, I don't remember, but CDC was in France, I think. Anyway, so these computers are used to calculate pi. In 1954, they spent 30 minutes, and in 2009, they spent 423 hours to calculate 1 trillion digits. And because the computers they had in 1954 was not reliable, so that they couldn't run the program for hours and hours, the computers would stop working while running the program. And in 2002, these computers were more reliable so that they could run the program without stopping it. But at the same time, it's very, very difficult to write a program for these supercomputers today. This picture is currently world's fastest supercomputer, Summit. And this particular machine has more than 4,000 nodes and 2 million GPU cores. And it's really hard to write a program that run scales across 2 million GPU cores. So yes, theoretically, you can still write a program for supercomputers, but it's hard. So I decided to use cloud or a regular server machine. The exact number of digits is 31 trillion, 450 billion, etc. So this is the first 14 digits of pi. And I thought this number was even better than just 31 trillion. So I picked this number deliberately. And we spent 121 days to calculate this amount. So it took almost 4 months, a little bit more than 4 months. And the program we used is yCruncher. So this is something you can download from the internet. This is public. Unfortunately, the source code is not public, so you cannot see the implementation. But this is something you can download from the internet and run on your laptop or desktop computers. The author is Alexander E. He doesn't work for Google, so we are not really related in terms of business. The main compute node we used was a virtual machine with 96 virtual CPUs and 1.4 terabytes of RAM. So this is still big, but not something you cannot buy from a hardware store. This is reasonably big, but it's something you can get in your company. I wouldn't say at home, but at company, yes. And the total I/O, I think this is one of the most interesting metrics we had, is 9 petabytes for reads and 8 petabytes for writes. Again, if you already deal with big data, you probably do like tens of petabytes of I/O every week. Probably that's how big they should be. But again, if this is generated from a single process running on a single machine, I think 9 petabytes is still a significant amount of data. And if you don't work for Google, you'd probably need to pay more than $200,000 or 160 euros, 160,000 euros. I didn't because I happen to work for Google. But yes, and there are a couple of cost-saving techniques that we could have used, but we really didn't. And in that case, the total cost would have been around $60,000. And since last year, there have been a couple of improvements on Google Cloud. And if we take it into account, the total cost today would be around $30,000. But it's still a lot of money. And this is, well, just in case you're wondering, this is the formula we used. It's basically a huge summation. Like it loops over this summation iterations, and then in the last stage of the calculation, you divide the number. So it's a simple task, like adding a lot of numbers, like billions of times. Why would you use cloud today? Because it's just easy to run a program. You can download the existing program and run it. You don't have to write some things from scratch most of the case, like supercomputers. And it just takes minutes to start a new cluster. It takes years to design and build a new supercomputer. And for cloud, you can just start a new cluster within a minute. And if you don't need it anymore, you can just shut it down, and you don't have to pay for the cluster. So it's easier to play with, and it's often more reliable than, for example, desktop computers or laptops, because cloud machines, anyway, like all of machines in a data center use server-grade components, so they are often more reliable, and like power supply and cooling, and they are earthquake tolerant, so they tend to run without failures for a longer period of time. And even if something was wrong, you just need to restart a virtual machine, and you get the same environment again. And it's easy to operate. For example, when taking backups, you just need to take snapshots, and suddenly you have a full copy of the data. On physical machines, you need to copy everything from one hard drive to another, and it sometimes takes longer. And everything can be done remotely. For example, I moved from Tokyo to Seattle while doing this calculation, and I didn't have to move a single machine. And this is an overview of the cluster. So we have one giant machine in green here. This ran the program and was running Windows Server, because Y-Cruncher was more optimized for Windows, not for Linux. Otherwise, I would have used Linux because I had more experience with Linux Server. But anyway, and there were additional storage nodes to provide 240 terabytes of storage. This was necessary because of Google Cloud's limitation. Google Cloud currently allows 64 terabytes of disk attached to one single virtual machine, but we needed about 200 terabytes, including the result disk. So we had to work on the limitation. So we decided to use a network storage on top of the operating system and mount these storage drives over iSCSI. So in the end, this worked really well. This configuration provided write throughput of 16 gigabps and read throughput of 26 gigabps. So they are performing almost at network cap. And if you have a process running for multiple months, you probably want to take backups just in case anything goes wrong. And Y-Cruncher automatically saves checkpoints during the calculation. And we needed to take copies of these checkpoint files. And most of the cloud platforms have snapshot snapshots as a function, right? So you just need to click the button and take copies of these snapshots, the disks. And instead of clicking the button every time, I wrote a script to automate the process, because there was 26 disks, and I didn't want to like check all the checkboxes every single time when I took backups. And I run a program, a script, once or twice a week, depending on how busy the calculation was. Because Y-Cruncher deletes all the snapshots before writing new things. So you need to actually make sure that there is actually valid snapshot before taking backups. A valid checkpoint before actually taking backups. So I didn't automate the process because this was a one-off project, and the amount of time to automate that part and debugging was a little bit too much for me. And if you haven't restored from a backup, you probably don't have backups. That means there are a lot of examples when people thought they had backups, but they couldn't restore from these backups. So I practiced some disaster scenarios, like intentionally shutting down machines or stopping the program, and made sure that I could actually restore from these files. And it saved my life twice. And this is a monitoring process. On cloud, you have some monitoring solutions, and on Google Cloud, you have Stackdriver. This is Google's first-party monitoring tool, and the other option I used was Datadog. This is a third-party program. So in that case, you install the agents, and the engines monitor virtual machines. And this is a screenshot of the actual snapshot. Sorry. I need to switch the topic. This is the snapshot of the actual dashboard. So you have the progress number, like 37% done, and system uptime, and CPU time, and disk throughput. So basically, just by looking at this dashboard, you can tell whether the calculation was still running or not. And I shared this dashboard to my managers so that they would know that I was actually doing something. Like there was a progress. It was a long process, so I really appreciate the patience. And there are a couple of allows I set for this program. The first allow was for individual host down. So if you have a virtual machine failure, you get an email telling, hey, you have a machine shut down. And the other alert is for the average CPU usage of the main compute node. And if that's less than 1%, you get an email. And I set the window to 1 hour because as you see, the CPU usage on the second chart fluctuates a lot, and it's really hard to set a fixed number for a short period of time. I couldn't really set, hey, 1% for 1 minute or something. So I had to enlarge the window to 1 hour. And this really helped reduce false negatives and false positives. When I got an email, there was actually a failure. So it worked really well. And I did most of the part. So this was originally my personal-ish project, and it grew out of Google. But in fact, this is a team effort. So I had computing resources that I could use without paying the money. And I had manager support. They funded the project, and they actually didn't care how much I was spending time and money. Well, probably they cared, but it worked well. And I had colleagues, this was being recorded. I forgot about it. I had colleagues who gave me technical hints, like technical advice when I had some technical issues. And even though this project started as a personal project, when it was complete, I reached out to PR and marketing teams, and they supported the announcement part. I couldn't have reached out to all the media and newspapers by myself. So these teams really helped me announce the project. And over the 4 months, I hit a couple of corner cases on cloud, and or I had some technical feedback on the project, and the product team at Google really listened to these feedback, and they eventually addressed some of the concerns I had. So that also helped me finish the project smoothly. So what we've learned is really, it's not very straightforward, I'd say. So in hindsight, this seems like a simple project. Like I just downloaded the program and then run it on cloud, and anyone can use cloud. Like it's just about clicking buttons and launch virtual machines. But before we finished, like we announced the project, people were not really sure that we could use cloud to break the world record of Pi. There are past records with desktop computers or server machines, but people really didn't try with the cloud. And we were not sure whether we could run the program for 4 to 5 months without any issues on a single virtual machine. And we were not quite sure that these iSCSI drives were running on the cloud could handle petabytes of I/O. So there are a lot of uncertainties, and we figured out it was indeed possible. And I think it's an interesting part of using cloud. You can just replicate some of the ideas, or you can just apply some of the techniques that were used for other projects to your project and work on your problem. And the second part of this talk is about how I got here, or in other words, why would you bother calculating pi even though if you had computers? So I was born and raised in Osaka, Japan. That's why I speak Japanese a little more than, yes. I actually speak Japanese better than English. And I studied programming when I was 11 years old, and some of my first programming language was C, Pascal, and x86 assembly. One of these is almost extinct today, but and I was writing command line tools and games for MS-DOS. MS-DOS is a pre-Windows operating system by Microsoft, and you only see characters instead of Windows. And this screenshot is a program I wrote in 1997 to calculate pi. And because I was just 12 or 13 years old, I had no idea how these equations work. So I just copy and pasted this source code from textbook. And this program only calculated 20 digits, about 20 digits. And the world record in 1997 was around 60 billion digits. So that's the difference between a real scientist and like elementary school or high school kid could do. And well, someone said I was good at math, but I wasn't. I really didn't like math in high school. And my high school teacher even suggested I study something different rather than computer science, like liberals or social studies. So yeah, your math grades really suck, so you should probably study something different. So I decided to study something different. I really liked programming. That's why I'm here. But this is one of the source code I rescued from my hard drives. I wrote this River C game in high school, and this is not a great source code. If you look at this today, you have a lot of magic numbers like 0, 3, 93, and you have no idea what these mean. And or 2 and 1 and 0, or there are no comments at all, right? And even the function number is put waku. So this should have been draw borders or something. So put is, of course, an English word put, but it should have been draw because it's a game. And waku is a Japanese word for border. I couldn't come up with a proper English word. So I had to make up the function name, and I got much better than then. But this, I think this taught me an important lesson today. I often spend too much time trying to figure out what's the best way to learn something, like instead of actually learning something, like spending too much time configuring IDs or editors or trying to find the best textbook. And sometimes it's just easier and more efficient to get started. So this still helps me. And this like kind of brute force learning process helped me learn programming anyway. And so going back to a school story, I studied educational psychology in my first year in school, in university, and then my professor, the homeroom professor, came to me and said, "Hey, do you really want to study education? Like, you seem to like computers much more than like actually studying about educational psychology. Why don't you move to the computer science department?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so. I agree." So I switched to the computer science major and studied computer science and got my master's in CS. And I still think this is one of the best life decisions I've made so far. Not necessarily because you need to study computer science to become a good software engineer, but this was the change from what I was told to do to what I really wanted to do. So I think I made the right decision here. And I started working at Panasonic. Panasonic is a Japanese company which is today more than 100 years old. So it's a very traditional company. And I was working on embedded programming. So like car navigation systems and factory automation systems. So it's very, very different from cloud computing. And then I quit the job 2 years later and started working at Gree. Gree is a mobile game company, and I then started working on taking care of servers or like managing servers, writing automations, automation tools, etc. So this is a little bit similar to what we call site reliability engineering today. And I wanted to work for Google and applied Google and didn't get an offer 4 times before actually getting an offer. So fun fact, you can apply for the same company many times without actually paying anything. It's absolutely free to apply. And I got an offer for the software engineer, customer solutions engineer position at Google in my 5th try. It was a painful process, but it worked out in the end. I didn't actually mean to apply so many times, but Google recruiters kept reaching out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, do you want to apply again?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not? It's free." So I sent my resume again and again, and it worked out. And after joining Cloud Team, so in a team, there was a tradition of celebrating Pi Day on March 14th. And last year, a colleague of mine calculated up to 1 trillion digits using one virtual machine. And then I realized, hey, we might have enough computing resources to do even more digits and possibly break the world record. And I did some paper napkin math. So we knew the numbers for the past world record. It was about 15 petabytes of I/O for 22 trillion digits. So if you draw the line like to 31 trillion digits, the total I/O would be about 20 petabytes. And the network throughput we have is 16 gigabps. So if you divide 20 petabytes by 16 gigabps, you get 130 days. So it's about 5 to 6 months. So I guess that's possible. Using cloud, you should have a relatively reliable machine, so it shouldn't be too difficult. And it was a little bit difficult, more difficult than I thought, but it worked out. And my manager supported this idea, so we decided to carry on. And I moved from Tokyo to Seattle, as I said. Just in case you are not sure which is which, Tokyo is on the left side and Seattle is on the right side. Both of the cities happen to have a tower, but Tokyo Tower is higher, like taller than Space Needle, a little bit. So I always wanted to work in another country. I had never worked or lived outside Japan. And this taught me an interesting lesson. So I'm a Japanese citizen. That means I can work and live in Japan. But in the US, I'm an Asian alien worker, so that's the legal technical term. So if I had to leave my company, I'd also have to leave the country. I can't change employer while on the work visa. There are a couple of work visas. Some people can, but some people can't. And this really helped me understand different life situations of different people. Some people just cannot afford to change their employer. So I used to say, hey, you can just find another company if you don't like your work, but some people just can't. Some don't have that option. And as I said, I speak Japanese as my native language, first language, and I still struggle with English a lot, as you can tell. And in the US, people speak English more than Japanese, so it's very challenging. There are a couple of good changes. In Japan, same-sex marriage is not legally recognized, so I can't get married with some of the same-sex women. But in the US, it's legally recognized, so it's lawful and legal to marry someone of the same sex. And so I have my female partner, and it's really easy to say, hey, we are married in the US. In Japan, you have to explain, like, what does it mean? And the wage gap between men and women is 25% in Japan, and it's 18% in the US. And it's smaller, but 18% is not like the perfect number. No way. But I feel the difference. It's a subtle difference, but I feel the difference every single day, unfortunately. And as an Asian woman, this is a little bit US-centric topic, but it's a tricky place to be in. So we are somewhat represented, actually well represented, but often marginalized. Let me explain. So we have these numbers are from Google's tech positions. So we have 45% Asian workers, and about a third of these Asians are women. And we have 51% white workers. So that and the US population of Asians is about 6%. So we have way more Asians in the tech workforce than the overall US Asian population. So we have a fairly good amount of Asian women in the workforce. But if you take a look at the actual career progression between different race and gender, there is a little bit gap. So this graph actually explains the difference between. Did I say something wrong? This graph is about race and gender in different stages of in their career. And if you have a green bar, that means you have more senior people. And if you see a red bar, that means you have more junior people and less senior people. And the biggest green bar is obviously for white men. And on the right, in the end, you have Asian women. And so we sometimes struggle even harder to get promoted and progress in our career than Black women, Hispanic women. So it's really tricky. Of course, they are not represented, so that's another issue. But if you take a look at the career progression, there is this issue. So it's not like, hey, you have a lot of Asian workers. No, there is another issue. Sometimes being a minority gives a nice little boost. Like I got some free press coverage just because I was Japanese or I was queer. And so these new articles happened because of my identity, not because of my achievement. So it's a little bit interesting, but usually it works against me. So someone decided to create a Wikipedia article for me, and then this discussion happened to delete the article, whether they should delete the article. And these are actual quotes from the discussion. They were like, this is a trivial achievement. There's nothing novel or creative about her achievement. And this person is marginally notable, so we shouldn't have an article for her. And it's really interesting to see people debate how trivial you are. And I didn't feel particularly bad for about this because I knew I wasn't like alone. I knew about this incident. So this woman won the Nobel Prize. Like we had an announcement a few days ago, and she didn't have a Wikipedia article, so someone created one. And then different people jumped in and said, "Hey, she just won the Nobel Prize. She just won one prize, and we shouldn't have a Wikipedia article because that's one single event." That's ridiculous, isn't it? But that happened because of, well, we haven't seen any like male scientists face the same situation, so we suspect it's because of her gender. But yes, but this happened. So I can say I had the same experience as the Nobel Prize winner. So, but this is indeed an awful experience, and we have a rather sad history in tech. So this machine is ENIAC in 1945-6, and these two women standing in front of the machine are some of the earliest software engineers in the world. And women worked on software engineering because people thought hardware engineering was the cool thing, and let women work on something boring like software engineering. That's different than like what we think today, right? So I think it's interesting to see how these perspectives change over time. And these women, like female software engineers, indeed did an amazing job. That's why we have these like ENIAC worked really well with this software. And fun fact, these female software engineers didn't get invited to the dinner parties to celebrate the launch. Only their counterpart male software engineers got invited. So that's what it was. But we have notable female figures in computer science. This is Grace Hopper, who developed COBOL, the programming language. And no matter how we hate COBOL today, it's an important milestone in the computer science history. And we wouldn't have the same computer science society as we do today without her effort, right? And this is another example of Margaret Hamilton, who worked for NASA to write software for the Apollo space rocket. And the pile of paper she's standing next to is the source code her team wrote. So that's how much they had to write to send the space vehicle to the moon and bring it back to the Earth. And when we think about historical achievement, we often think about like people on the stage or in the picture. There are two astronauts standing on the moon, and we always think of the picture, right? But there was actually the third astronaut taking the picture on the moon. And there are literally thousands of people working on the Earth to safely deliver the mission. And of course, she was one of them. And without her effort, we couldn't have put the spacecraft on the moon. So I think it's equally important to recognize these people's work behind the scenes. And we do have a lot of notable female figures working behind the scenes. This is one of the recent examples. Dr. Katie Bowman, who wrote a program. Well, she said her team wrote the program. So she and her team wrote a program to decode a black hole image from a radio telescope receive like data. And that particular black hole exists 450,000 light years away from the Earth. So they had to really work hard to pick up some. Well, I really don't know how it worked, but they really had to come up with a creative algorithm to decode the image. So we have a lot of, and these three women are only some of the examples. We have way more notable women in computer science and tech. So it's not because we are doing like worse than other people. It's just because there is some systematic problem. And in fact, I really never thought I would become a professional software engineer until I started working as a software engineer, because my high school teacher told me like, hey, you can't become a software engineer. It's a really hard job. And I didn't think I would become a good software engineer until like never really. Maybe I was good in the classroom, or I was good enough in the team, but if you take a look at the greater world, maybe I wasn't that good. But I was really good enough to break the world record. And even after breaking the world record, I went to my manager and said, hey, manager, I think I broke the world record. Do you think I should write a personal blog post? Or would Google PR team be interested in writing something about it? And they were like, yeah, we really should reach out to them. We can go bigger. So that's how much the difference between my perspective and like the actual work. And this is something everyone experiences. We call this syndrome, this phenomenon as imposter syndrome. And it's absolutely normal to experience this kind of gap. But it's just important to know, hey, your perspectives is sometimes different from what actually you are. This is the end of the talk, but the first point of the talk is combination of existing tools might actually help solve a new problem. I merely combined well, I really shouldn't say I didn't write a lot of code because that would hurt my credibility, but I merely combined existing tools and did some plus alpha work. We already had cloud, we already had the tool, and I just ran it. And that broke the world record. And corporate culture and teamwork matter because I couldn't have finished it by myself. I can't afford $200,000 alone, let it alone. But the announcement part was indeed a team effort. And cloud is a new tool because I work for Google Cloud. I wanted to say this part. But cloud is a new tool for large scale computing. I still don't have a supercomputer, but my childhood dream came true because of these all the existing resources and these tools and cloud. That's my talk. Thank you very much.
Do you have any questions? Any question? No.
Why do you stop at 31.4 trillion of?
Right, that's a good question. So you, as you see in the equation, you eventually. Oh, that's a long. So you eventually finish the add part and multiply and divide. So you actually need to move on to the next part. And that final stages would take approximately 10 to 20% of the total calculation. So you actually need to decide how much you're going to calculate and come up with a result.
Any other question? Okay.
So next time, if you want to go like 40 billion, you can start from where you stopped, or you have to.
No, unfortunately. So as you see here, you have way more digits on the right side, and when you multiply and divide, you actually do divide this number and this number. Like at the end of the calculation, you lose a lot of digits. So you can't actually construct these variables again from the final product, and I didn't save the and for world record purposes, you need to do everything by yourself. You can't just read someone's data and restart the calculation. You really need to start from scratch.
Hi, I got a question. How difficult has it been to justify like this project in the enterprise world? Because like when you're outside like the academy, everyone wants like a justification, like an application, like So sometimes it gets difficult, like these kind of problems, to be justified, like because everyone was like, and how does it work? How can I apply it? I don't know if I'm clear.
Sure. So Google is a strange place. So we have hundreds of thousands of machines in your data centers, and as long as it doesn't have production, we have some discretion to use some of the computing resources. So I didn't really have to justify. I was like, hey, I think I need about 600 cores and like 300 to 400 terabytes of storage, and they were like, yeah, if the ops team, site SRE team is okay, we are okay. So I didn't really work hard to justify it. I just needed to make sure that my main work was not affected much because my personal project. But in real other companies, I think it'd be hard to justify a farm project. It's hard to justify $200,000 for a farm project, and I can't imagine how. I think it's almost impossible. So that's why I said corporate culture matters.
Thank you, Emma. It was very nice to hear you. Thanks. So now I'm going to call Despoina on stage. Sorry, I know. She comes from Greece. She did a PhD in France, applied mathematics, and she is a R&D team lead at Miro, but she has a surprise for you tonight. So here is the stage.
So hi, thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Emma, for your really inspiring talk. So yeah, I'm Despoina, and until almost 2 weeks ago, I was a team lead in the R&D team at Miro. Since then, things have changed, and I have taken over a CTO in Treivazor, which is a new startup. But today, I'm going to talk to you about some of the thematics, some of the problematics we had to deal with at Miro, and specifically about computer vision. So first of all, what is Miro? Some of you might not know. So we are an on-demand end-to-end photo shoot delivery platform. So what does this consist in? Basically, the clients, they log into our platform and they can order their suits. They tell us what they need. It's usually real estate or food or pack suits or e-commerce, and they pay. And that's when Miro steps in and takes charge of everything else. So basically, we have a group of photographers that we have already onboarded and tested. We have made sure that they are the best for the client's needs. So we are matching the photographer with the best project, because it's important not only for the client to have the best photographer for the job, but also for the photographer to be doing something that he enjoys. So there are photographers that they prefer to do real estate, there are photographers that they prefer to do food. It changes. So once the photographers are finished with the shoot, they upload their photos in the Miro platform, and they get paid by us, by Miro, and that's when their mission has finished, and that's where another mission starts, this one of the R&D team. So provided the huge amount of suits that we have to handle every week, that can go up to 2,000 suits per week in more than 90 countries, we need to introduce some kind of automation in our pipeline, and that's what we try to do in the R&D team. We try to have a completely automated retouching pipeline, and in the end, of course, we still have a human who will give the final touch and who will validate the quality of our delivered media. So once it has been validated, the client can find their own images in the platform, and all this is done basically in 48 hours. So as you have understood, computer vision and deep learning is a crucial part for Miro growth, because we need to make sure that our work is scalable, that we can manage to deliver this great amount of shoots in really 48 hours, as we promised. And so starting basically from an image as not interesting, I would say, as the first one, which is just a professional photo shoot, we want to be able to deliver a more aesthetically pleasing image, an image that if it is real estate, it really invites you to come and spend the time. If it is food, it's inviting to eat, and if it is a restaurant, it invites you to go and eat there. So our journey in the R&D team started by listing all the possible things that can go wrong with images. And as you can see, the list is really, really extensive, and I'm afraid it's short. So we had to make sure that we address a lot of different issues. I have some examples here. So for example, the blur can really degrade the quality of an image. We have to make sure about the white balance. That just means that we need to make sure that whites are still whites when you see an image and they have not turned yellow or magenta or any other color. We also need to make sure that there is no noise in the images, no grainy effect. And for example, sharpening is also a big thing, as it makes the images pop more and are more pleasing. So our first idea was to test a set of automatic editors that maybe they have done what we would like to do before us, so why spend any time of research and development if something already exists. So just for reference, this is the problem that we're trying to address. The first one is the photographer's suit, is what they upload in our platform. And the second image is what we expect as a result. So at this stage, we really concentrate in 3 issues that they appear to be the more defining when it comes to the clients. And this is the exposure, the color enhancement, and the white balance. So we started by testing the editors. So the first automatic editor we tested, unfortunately, delivered images that they were underexposed. As you can see, they remain as dark as the first one and kind of yellowish. So for the second one, yellow still, but this time with more magenta and still underexposed. And the third one, it went completely not good, and we ended up with severely underexposed images with a lot of saturation. The colors are completely transformed. So we collected ourselves and we decided to see what has gone wrong with all these experiments. So what we had noticed is that its editor contains a bias. So basically, we cannot get rid of green or magenta effects because that's how they are delivered. We also noticed that global settings, so when we change in total the image, might not be enough to treat professional quality, to give a professional quality result. However, when we try to apply local changes, this also ends up being an issue, as the computational cost does not really justify the result. Finally, yes, we have to deal with really, really big images, but thankfully for that, we have no constraints for production costs. And we are also very lucky to have our very own data sets that consists in before and after images that they have been professionally retouched by the retouchers at Miro. So at this stage, we thought that maybe it's better if we just try to build our own automatic retoucher and instead of try to just use something that does not get the work done. So what we needed at that moment was a game plan, and started by defining the problematic. So the first thing is what we really want to achieve by an automatic editor. What is our goal? Do we want to make Miro work faster? Do we want a solution that it will not require any human supervision? It was decisions that were made in this step. Finally, what does automatic retouching consist in? It can be a lot of things, and of course, we cannot address everything at once. That's when we decide to break down in smaller modules our goal. So in the case of automatic retouching, we could separate in 3 big parts. The first one being the technical retouching, everything that consists in noise, in artifacts, in blur, things that they are kind of easier to quantify. Geometry retouching, which is basically if your image is taken with an angle or if your image is tilted or rotated, is things that we can, again, see and assess kind of easily. And the final and the more challenging part is the aesthetic retouching, because, I mean, the whole notion of aesthetic is so dependent on so many things that they are not really specifically scientifically measured or quantified. And that was the most challenging for us, and I'm going to go back to that in a few minutes. So for the aesthetic retouching, it's everything that includes basically the colors enhancement, and the exposure. The final thing that we needed to assess before moving forward was the feasibility. So basically, what can we expect to attain in a week, in a month, or a year of work? And finally, since it's research and development, we had to see what can be just development, so what already exists, but we just need to develop it fast, what can be developed after a little bit of research, and what is a huge research questions that we will be working on for the next years. So our toolbox, nothing very surprisingly here. We experimented a lot with convolutional neural networks. We experimented a little bit with generative adversarial networks. And of course, since we are doing research as well, we are really standing on the shoulders of giants, and all the research in our domain at least is easily accessible through archive. Of course, the team codes in Python and just a little bit of C++. And of course, for the deep learning, the two most frequent frameworks, TensorFlow and PyTorch. So back to the aesthetic improvement. Just to remind you, the original photographer suit and what we would like to attain eventually. So once we saw that we could not be sure to use something already done, we decided to build our own model that will allow us to do this aesthetic improvement in the images. So we were inspired by deep lateral learning for real-time image enhancement and the very known and widely used by now UNet. So combining these two, we managed to build our own deconvolutional deep neural network, which takes as an input the original image of the photographer, and it delivers us the expected result as a human retoucher would have done in seconds. So just a reminder before I show you our results, what the other editors gave. Again, the yellow, the magenta, the oversaturated and underexposed image. And finally, this is what we managed to do. So granted, there is still improvement to be done, but it's definitely something much closer to the professional retoucher result that we would expect to attain. So, okay, once the aesthetic retouch part is done, have we really finished our work? Is this all we need to do? And how do we know if what we have actually developed is beautiful enough, the image that we have returned? So for now, we are mainly guided by the experts' opinion, and we're lucky because we have a lot of experts in Miro. However, this opened a new research question in Miro about aesthetic metric learning, which basically consists in teaching the machine to understand what an aesthetically pleasing image is, what are the features that would make that photo aesthetically pleasing, and aim even further to rank images, to propose the best image, and have our own notion of aesthetically pleasing images. So a critique we get quite often at Miro is our images that they have been edited through artificial intelligence and the automatic pipeline still photographs. Are they still real? Are they fake news? And okay, I can only answer to that in a very philosophical manner. I mean, from the moment we actually press a button, either in our camera or in our smartphone, we have already skewed reality. We just take an instance, and that can be on its own, yes, not a lie, but fake news. So just to sum up, in the last years, artificial intelligence has changed not only the way that we shoot photos, but also the way that we edit photos. And basically, with the recent advancements, especially on scene parsing and scene understanding and scenario understanding, we can really expect big breakthroughs when it comes to image editing. It can even be locally specific edits that they just need to be applied once. We can separate, for example, textures and objects and materials. It will be really, really important in this domain of application. So actually for us, I mean, image and artificial intelligence and camera is just the beginning of a new love story, and yeah, we expect a lot of it from the future. So, thank you.
Questions?
I have a question about the use of the tool, how the photographers feel with the fact that the image is edited and not by them.
So basically what Miro is doing is they take care of images that they are not art images. They're images of real estate, for example, for real estate agencies. There are images of food like Uber Eats delivery. So for the photographer is a gig where it can get him some fast money. And for a shoot that he would normally have to spend 4 hours editing after, we just take care of that, and he's freed after just taking the photos. So, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there is always, of course, the opposite case. There are people who do not believe in it or who do not think it's a good thing for the photographer. But our group of photographers that have been onboarded is a really large number and all over the world. So I think that at least some people are satisfied with it.
Thank you for the interesting talk. How do you edit the images? Do you like make it like a normal editor, where a photo editor, where you change the saturation and the white balance, or is it more like you put on a layer and change each pixel individually?
So there are different solutions for different problems. So what I talked about in this case is a destructive method. That means that it completely replaces the original image from the final. We do not do any difference, we do not apply any transformations on the raw, so they cannot really go back to it. We just give them the final output, and yeah, then the editor can just accept or not the final image. So,
Thank you. Obviously, it's a first, but we are late, and I hope it's okay. We're going to have a little bit less networking, but I'm super excited to ask Žofia to come, and I would like to extend a super warm thank you to you, because I don't know if you noticed, but we were supposed to have a sports journalist talking tonight, and she canceled last week. She apologized, and Žofia accepted to prepare something for us from her PhD work. So thank you. She comes from Slovakia. She did a PhD in France. She did a postdoc in Edinburgh. And now she's working as a software engineer in machine learning at Criteo. So can you come and introduce her work?
Thank you. So I would like to thank the organizers team for organizing this great meetup. It's really impressive. So I prepared, I thought this would be fun to show you my projection on the Google Maps, how I actually studied and worked. So I'm from Slovakia, from Bratislava. And I did my master's in mathematics in Vienna, which is not that far. And then I went to Paris to do Erasmus at Polytechnique. Yes, you can do Erasmus at Polytechnique. And then I went to Grenoble, where I did my PhD and spent some time in Edinburgh for my postdoc. And now I came back to Paris, I work at Criteo. And I work, in Criteo, basically we do personalized advertising. I work in a team with Marina that works on recommender systems. And I wanted to advertise a great opportunity we're having at Criteo. It's called Returnship, where we basically offer 6 months of internship for people who has been off the market more than 2 years. And before they were working as software engineers, statisticians, data scientists. And basically we will we will get them back on trace with their careers by training them in Python, machine learning, and mentoring in their careers. So you can find more information. So, and now let's get more mathy at this time of the evening. Oh, okay. So how to accelerate molecular simulations with data. I'm going to talk about my thesis, about the subject on which I spent 3 years. And so I'm going to talk about various perspectives about how one can look at one problem. So the main application will be molecular dynamics, so which is used in physics, chemistry, molecular simulations. But I'm a mathematician, and so my interest was mainly in sampling methods and Markov chain Monte Carlo. And I was basically, part of my work considered studying stochastic differential equations, which were used to generate, to do the MCMC. Also, I looked on how to discretize those equations, which is another domain of mathematics, is numerical analysis. And also, if we want to run it, we need to know the algorithmical efficiencies of our simulations. So I also look at some computational speedups that we can achieve. So why are molecular simulations so challenging? So so what are they, first of all? First question is, so it's a virtual microscope for, in many scientists, basically when you need to simulate new materials, understand drug design, understand chemical reactions. All the scientists are running molecular simulations. And these simulations are extremely expensive. Just to give you an idea about the scales, so the amount of substance, you might remember from the high school, is measured in molar mass, which is scale, so behind is the Avogadro number, which is 10 to power 23. Yeah. So you have molecular vibrations, which are 10 to power 12 to 14 hertz. So the molecules vibrate at very high frequencies. We can actually integrate this system, so to update the states, only with very, very small time steps, which are at the rate of femtoseconds. And so the distances we're measuring are measured in angstroms, which is 10 power minus 10. So just to give you an idea, so basically it's a very highly dimensional system, very complicated, evolving at very, very small time steps. And the interesting physics and chemistry happens in hours or very, very long time. So we need to really run it for very long times. So there has been Nobel Prize awarded for the efforts since last 70 years. Actually, people try to solve this problem. And so mathematically, what are we actually computing? Why are we running the simulation? So we are interested into computing so-called macroscopic properties, which are basically, we are computing expectations with respect to some distribution, which is the Boltzmann distribution, which describes the stationary state of that system. And so you might see where I'm going with the Markov chain Monte Carlo. You come from the domain. Basically, the main goal is to approximate these highly dimensional integrals. And so why is it so difficult? Another reason is that I haven't mentioned yet is that the underlying distribution is highly non-convex and multimodal. And so what does it mean? That there are basically several locally stationary states of which this molecule gets trapped, and we are basically wasting the computational effort before getting into another mode of the distribution. So the overall variance of the simulation is incredibly high. And you can actually apply everything that I will be talking about is mostly applicable to when you're running a Bayesian inference and you are trying to estimate your posterior. So you can think beyond just Boltzmann distribution. So just to say the multimodality of distribution is, we call it metastability of this, how actually the molecules get stuck in the locally stationary states. And so by designing all the efficient methods, we'll be actually trying to tackle all these bottlenecks that I mentioned, right? So the actually trying to generate efficiently new samples from the distributions and to explore all the modes as efficient as possible. Okay, so don't get scared. So what is Markov chain Monte Carlo? What is MCMC? So you might probably know. So Markov chain is simply, it's a sequence of random variables where the next state depends only on the previous state. So it's called the Markov property, right? And so we are trying to basically compute this highly dimensional integral. And the trick is that thanks to the ergodicity, so-called it's basically pathwise convergence, we are able to actually generate Markov chain and replace the highly dimensional integral with only the integral over paths over the Markov chain, right? So instead of having highly dimensional integral, I replace it with one-dimensional integral over time. Of course, it's not that simple because generating a Markov chain is really difficult. So my thesis was around Langevin dynamics, which is a physical model which allows to generate this Markov chain. So it's a second order stochastic differential equation. So if you might recognize, if you know Hamiltonian dynamics, these two terms, and then there's an additional term with fluctuation dissipation. Basically, this is the randomness, the Wiener process. And this, the process has the Boltzmann distribution as the stationary distribution. So basically, I can use the QT and PT and sample and average over time, and I will get an approximation of this integral. So just not to, we want to, it's very hard to take just the original equations and run the simulations. This is very difficult. So people are actually trying to come up with surrogate models that will do the computations faster, that will converge faster and get some, give the answer to the physicist that it's waiting. So there was a method which is actually comes from computer science. One of my advisors was a computer scientist, and he had the idea, he worked on incremental algorithms. So he proposed a method where basically you are freezing parts of your system based on the kinetic energies of every particle. And having this information, you can actually design an algorithm which will only update parts of the system which have changed its states before the updates. And so basically, for me as a mathematician, it means I am replacing the original equations, and instead of having the linear term here, I'm putting a nonlinearity. And so the first question that comes up with is basically, can we do this? Will this thing converge? Can I say to the physicist, like, hey, you can trust this because you will get the correct answer in shorter time? And so the first point of view was really theoretical, proving that, yes, this thing converges. Then we need to actually do the MCMC, so numerically, how to discretize these equations. And finally, also analyzing the algorithms and estimating the total gains we can gain. And so what I want to say with like this different perspective, it's very, I really like this subject, like looking at one thing from different perspectives, because every time I learn something completely new, every time you understand more about the problem and you are actually able to come up with new ideas and to advance your research study by looking at the same problem from different perspectives. I wanted to put here this slide because it makes an interesting connection between molecular simulations or this community and the machine learning community. So you might know stochastic gradient Langevin dynamics, which is used in machine learning as an optimizer, and basically the numerical discretizations. It was motivated from numerical discretization of the Langevin dynamics. So if you want to know more about other methods, not just Hamiltonian Monte Carlo, I encourage you maybe to see these references. I will just briefly mention this. So there is also other influence from machine learning to the molecular dynamics community, where we are trying to use machine learning to enhance the simulations by learning what part of the systems are the most important. What is interesting here is that actually the data that we are getting, we are generating ourselves from our simulations. But then it's basically unsupervised learning approach, clustering approach, which allows me to discover the most important parts of my system on which I need to focus. So to conclude, first of all, the message I want to say is don't waste computations. Use the most efficient MCMC sampler when you're doing Bayesian inference or anything. There are many methods and they differ a lot. And what I also learned is that really doing the theoretical work makes sense because we need to put guarantees on our methods, on our models. I believe this is also important in machine learning in this community. So we should embrace it and do it. And the last thing, as I said, every time I spoke with someone from different community, with chemists, biologists, or physicists, I had to change my language, change my perspective to be able to explain him my point of view and method. And it was actually very interesting for me because I sometimes came up with new ideas because I had to really find this common language and realize that, oh, well, this could be done because I had the different perspective on my problem. And there is one, it's always possible. You just need to want to do it. And there is the mathematics, which is the common language of all sciences. So I encourage to collaborate across various disciplines. So I hope it wasn't too brutal with math at this late hour. I apologize. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, I got a question. What kind of solution you had with the original equation, and when you add the nonlinearity? Because I guess that it depends on what kind of solution you have, the way you're going to to approach to the ergodic measure. You got my question?
So if you're asking about stationary
yeah,
measures,
for instance,
so
that.
what is interesting is in this change equations, because I'm only playing with the momenta marginal. I have the same position marginal, which is usually what I want to measure in my system. So this part is the same, and then of course there are assumptions under which on this modified kinetic energy, under which I converge to a stationary measure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the talk. Have you tried to consider sequential Monte Carlo samplers to compare with the Langevin dynamics discretization schemes?
Me personally, not. Yeah, but I know that there is some use of sequential Monte Carlo in this domain. So
okay. So thank you very much, and I would like to point out. Well, I'm going to say a few things. Thank you, Laetitia. Thank you, Dorothée. Even if she's not here, she helped us a lot. Thank you to the technical team, thanks to which we have been able to live stream and to record the meetup. And thank you to all of our speakers for being there. Thank you to you for having been brave enough to be there with us. And now I would like to call all the speakers, my fellow organizers, for the famous picture, and the cocktail is going to be right there. Thank you.